So when you give a high frequency stimulus where the frequency of action potential is so high that before the muscle has completed its contraction period, the next stimulus is already there and the muscle responds with the next contraction, leading to sustained contraction without any relaxation. Then we call it as tetanus. Now this graph might help us understand clonus and tetanus better. So you can see here that multiple stimuli have been given, but the frequency is not as high as here. So here, every second stimulus is falling in the relaxation period of the previous curve, which is why each time the muscle is partly relaxing and then again going into contraction. So you see this visibly as jerky movements in the muscle. So this is clonus. On the other hand, here you've increased the frequency of stimulation. The frequency is so high that every second stimulus is falling in the contraction period of the first curve. Therefore, there is no relaxation. The muscle goes into sustained contraction, and that is called tetanus. Now that we've studied the relationship between frequency of stimulation and muscle contraction, let's look at another property of the muscle, that is the relationship between load applied on the muscle and the velocity of its contraction. Now we know from experience that light objects can be moved faster. So this means that velocity of muscle contraction decreases with increasing load on the muscle. So if you were to graphically plot this relationship, you would get a graph like this. So you can see that as the load increases, the velocity of contraction decreases. Now let's study another interesting property of the muscle, that is the relationship between the initial length of the muscle fiber and the tension generated in it. Now, what do you do when you're asked to throw a stone to your best ability? You first take your hand backward and then you throw. Likewise, when you want to kick a football, you actually take your foot backward and then you kick. Now, this is because you're trying to stretch your muscle, you're trying to increase the initial length of the muscle, so that you can generate more power, more tension. Now this is what we mean by the length-tension relationship. So there is a law which explains this relationship, and that is called Frank-Starling's law. Now this law states that the tension generated in a muscle is directly proportional to its initial length. But this is only within physiological limits. This is quite like a rubber band, where you go on stretching it, it'll recoil with much more force. But after a point, if you stretch it, it'll break. The same way, there is a physiological limit for the muscle also. So the optimal length is defined as that initial length at which the fiber develops greatest isometric tension. And this is because the actin-myosin overlap is maximum at the optimal length. That is why the highest tension, the maximum tension, is possible at this optimal length. Now, in the relaxed state, most of our muscles luckily have a length close to the optimal length. So we just have to stretch it a little in order to increase the tension further. Now this is how we plot the length tension curve. Now you can see that as the length increases, the tension also increases. Now this is the maximum tension, and it is also the physiological limit, meaning that after this, if you further stretch the muscle, the tension is actually going to decrease. So this is the graphical representation of Frank-Starling's law. With that, we come to the end of this session. Thank you.